All right, admit all. Boom, it's over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Get through the door. My company, we used to run conferences and we'd spend at least 10 minutes, what we call loading the room. I love this. You just press a button and suddenly everybody's in the room. It's magic.
Except you're all in my room.
Yeah. Right, well, welcome everybody. I expect there are still a few people to come, but we're keen because we've only got 1 hour and we're very grateful for giving up your time. We thought we'd get going straight away. So 4 of us are very privileged to host this, and that is Jen Harper-Deacon, who will speak to us in a moment, Catherine Turner, who runs a business in the Thames Valley, Brad Waldron, who is an international speaker, and myself, who does a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of the other. We have got a real mix of people today, people from all different walks of life, but there is a common theme that pretty much all of you have taken leadership positions, are either in them at the moment or are working with leaders in one way or another. And what we want to focus on today is extending our thinking about how do we look after the brains of those people who are under that pressure, either for yourself or for those that you work with. How can we think a little bit more broadly as to their needs? So without more ado, I'm going to introduce you to Jen Harper-Deacon. And Jen, why don't you start just by telling us a little bit about yourself and your story?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I've been over 30 years in the industry of healthcare, and through that time just carried on studying more and more modalities, realizing that the whole matrix of mind, body, spirit is actually very complex. And, you know, to me, one size definitely doesn't fit all. And through that time, I was lucky enough to have radio, television, book companies, publishing companies coming after me, wanting me to share my message out to the mainstream. And also I was a columnist for The Guardian, and then I was the columnist for the Sunday Times health column, call it What's the Alternative. So I was very blessed in the respect that I was in a position of leadership, and I was in a position of being fortunate enough to educate an awful lot of people, millions of people. But then my life changed back in 2009 with an unexpected diagnosis that was initially a double misdiagnosis, but that was a diagnosis of technically an untreatable form of cancer. And so after that period of time, there was a 10-year period where one thing after another happened in my life. So I went from someone very, very successful into quite a different lane. And many people during that time just said to me, why you, when all you've done in your life is want to help suffering and give people hope? And I said, but actually, why not me? Because I'm the one who's had a lot of training. I have a lot of lateral thinking, and where orthodox medicine may come to a halt with something and say there is no way, to me, with my eclectic background, which I sort of call myself now sort of like a primal biohacker, because on one side, I'm honoring everything that the natural rhythms of life, nature, herbs, plants has to offer, Chinese medicine, the seasons, everything that system of medicine brings, right the way through to critically food and nutrition, but looking right the way forward to evidence-based medicine, functional-based medicine, what we call biohacking the body. How can we upgrade our system with hacks? Looking at the new technology that we've got in available to us now. So it's a real sort of spectrum. And so during this time, my own life had some quite interesting challenges. And just to round it off, a few years ago, I fell down a full flight of stairs as well. And we're talking about the brain today. And one of the things that was so powerful after that fall downstairs was basically anytime you have a head injury, it's known as something called a TBI. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of this in the moment with the press, with sportsmen and TBI. And this is known as traumatic brain injury, where even children having having a micro trauma every time they head a football, for example, in a match. But what happens when you have this, and this also happens, so this is relevant to everybody on this call, is when we go over the age of 30, we go into this phase called mild cognitive impairment. And in particular, when we get to 40, we find that the brain, and I'm sure we're all aware that the brain uses glucose as a fuel, but what happens is over this age, the body becomes what we call more insulin resistant, as in the door for glucose in the brain remains a bit jammed or shut. So to feed the neurons, the body is not able to effectively take up glucose. This happens with type 2 diabetes. This happens with people with disorders like thyroid, menopause, where again, the body generally is more insulin resistant, and thus the brain too is more insulin resistant. And what happened to me then was I was running a very successful clinic at the time, and I found that after this fall, progressively, my brain just didn't function. So for example, I would be working with patients, I'd know exactly what was wrong with them, but it came to a certain point after only about 2 patients that I really couldn't verbalize what I knew I needed to talk to that patient about. And fortunate enough, in 2019, I started researching more about what is fueling the body now. And actually, it's not now, as in our ancestors, we've always run like a hybrid car. We've run on glucose or petrol, and we have a very efficient electric or ketone energy fuel source. But what happens is most of us actually never get into using the ketone fuel source. Now, the ketone fuel source in traditional senses, the only way you'd ever do this is you would actually fast.
Jen, can I just interrupt a second? We're getting feedback. Could I ask people to mute themselves, please? Sorry, we're getting some feedback on the call. Thanks very much.
Sorry, I don't know where I got to. Oh yes, so fasting. So to get into this state where your body uses this incredible ketone fuel, you either have to fast or you follow a high-fat ketogenic diet, which is a low-carbohydrate diet. And I won't go into the science of this, but basically that switches you into that fuel. So I was very averse to, or rather used to using both of these methods, but it simply wasn't enough for me. And it was when in May 2019, I was at a conference in the States, because I was really then studying this whole ketone technology. And it was extraordinary. I heard Dr. Ken Ford from NASA speak, and another wonderful scientist doctor called Dr. Lillian Mijaki-Paradis, who talked again about the brain and how the brain, literally the neurons in these situations are starving because the glucose cannot feed them. And therefore, if you don't have a fed neuron, you don't have focus, clarity, cognition, all of those things go out of the window. And most importantly, I'm sure many of you know about how significant sleep is, but if you don't sleep well, and also if you don't overnight, there's a process of detoxification called synaptic pruning, as Dr. Lillian calls it, where again, if the neurons are fed, it's like me putting my bins out overnight and the lorry coming along. If I've been fed on glucose and I've got a resistance to the glucose being uptaken by my neurons, I put the dirty bins out, but the bin men's coming along in their lorry using petrol. and they run out of fuel and they say, sorry, you'll just have to leave it there until we have another collection. Whereas what they found with ketones in the brain is no matter what's going on, the ketones will be uptaken by the neuron. They will repair the neuron. They allow this detoxification process to take place. And I'm just going to mention this because I'm sorry, it's my passionate area. I think it's really significant. By allowing this synaptic pruning to take place, the body then doesn't form amyloid plaques. So to me, my background is massively on preventative healthcare, and this is one of the biggest areas of preventative healthcare I've come across in 30 years, and thus why I'm so passionate, and actually why I'm able to speak today, no notes, looking at an iPhone, thanks to my body being totally fueled on ketones.
And how does the body produce ketones?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
How does the body produce ketones?
Well, I mentioned, yes, earlier that traditionally you have to either fast, normally for the average person, I'd say realistically 24 hours to get any form of measurable ketone in your bloodstream, or traditionally, again, 5 days of following a strict no more than 20 grams of net carbs in the body, a higher fat diet, and then after about 5 days, again, you can measure a compound called beta hydroxybutyrate in your blood. And when you're in what we call this marvelous state of ketosis, that is 0.5 millimoles on the blood scale. And I've worked with Olympic athletes where if they're traveling and suddenly there's been a delay and they've run out of their special food, again, they've traditionally taken 5 days to get back into this state. Whereas now, as I mentioned earlier, my passion with new technology, we are working with technology that was developed for NASA and the Navy SEALs and the American military that takes you into this clinical state of ketosis in under 1 hour.
Jen, I've been reading about the pyramid, the fuel pyramid, so to speak, where certainly my parents, I remember they would very much eat the meat and 2 veg type meals, and pretty much all their lives have been quite slim. Contrast that now with what's happened since the 50s and 60s in the US and the UK, where obesity, well, we have just become very fat nations. Yeah. But some decisions were made by nutritionists in America in the 50s and 60s that could be answerable for this in terms of that pyramid. Can you just explain a little bit about that?
Well, I think then during that time, as you said, the message that we have all followed for a long time, for many decades, has been that a healthy nutritional program revolves around a high carbohydrate diet and a very low fat diet. And actually, many eminent doctors and consultants and cardiologists have come out in more recent years just saying we have got the pyramid wrong. You should flip the pyramid over and it should be the low carb, high fat. And I was thrilled recently when I read this wonderful book by Professor Tim Spector, who's an epidemiologist at King's College London. And as he said, in his words, it's just superb. He said, fat for years considered the evil of nutrition is now shown to protect against heart disease, obesity, and diabetes, not the reverse. We urgently need to reassess what we think we know about food and unlearn the myths that have misled us for far too long. So I thought that said it in a nutshell, really.
I was looking on Netflix at they've got a documentary there called Fat Fiction, and it picks up the themes that you've just been talking about. And they've got nutritionists and doctors from both sides of the Atlantic, in fact from the Far East as well, all of whom have been looking at this and all coming up with the same conclusion that we are focusing far too much on carbohydrate in our diet, and that is having quite a problem with us. What are the damaging impacts of such a heavy dependency on carbohydrates?
Well, to me, we always have to look at the root cause of disease. So yes, I will address someone's symptoms, but to me, my job is, why has your body gone into this position of creating this pattern of symptoms? So that's the really important thing. So you just need to track back. So before lockdown, the last conference I was blessed to attend was the Metabolic Health Summit in LA. And every single scientist, doctor, and researcher there said the same thing. And this is what I know as well from functional medicine, is that when we keep elevating our blood sugar day in, day out, so in other words, we're using our mucky old petrol engine with no brake, we're just driving this engine, it will keep pushing your insulin levels up as well. And we know that raised insulin levels in the body very simply cause inflammation in the body. And then inflammation in the body is the root cause of all disease. So by the very action of reducing and having more of an awareness of choosing lower carbs, lower carbohydrate foods, and foods that matter, foods that actually have a nutritional value instead of the refined white carbohydrates, that will just bring our blood glucose levels down. It will stop the insulin charging up. It will then lower the inflammation and thus help with the disease process. And I think the other valuable thing I'd love to jump in here about the electric ketone engine, and this is from fasting, this is from following a ketogenic diet, or if people don't have time, just drinking a drink of ketones, and the right kind of ketones, the bioidentical ketones, is, yes, they are a fuel source. You know, we go back to our ancestors, they are a fuel source. But what I'm so passionate about is they're known as a dual metabolite with cell signaling properties. And some of these properties are utterly extraordinary. And in fact, there's a department at Oxford University who's also researching this. But to me, one of the big things I witness when I test bloods is, you see, after drinking a ketone, the blood sugar drops down. But what we can see, or what we can't see underneath the bonnet, is that with this cell signaling aspect, they are clinically repairing your DNA, but most significantly, it is bringing down inflammatory markers. So there's even a study looking at the microbiome, the gut, and seeing how it's turning off the inflazomes, or again, inflammatory markers in the gut. So it's such an exciting and emerging field of medicine that medicine's just waking up to. But in fact, to me, it goes right back to primarily how we always ran. We fasted and we feasted. We don't do that anymore.
I was kind of doing a little bit of just reading around this, and read that we've been trying to find an easier way of getting into ketosis, this state where we have the alternative fuel, and our minds and our brains benefit from that. But it's very difficult. In fact, I read something that you said, that you work with an Olympic athlete, and some people, you have to work the body so hard and starve it of carbs in order to force it into ketosis. But the NASA, working with the Navy SEALs, developed a way of creating identical ketones to the ones that your body produce, but external to the body. And that's what you're referring to, isn't it?
It is, in fact, but the early stages, they didn't actually have the bioidentical ones. So in the labs initially, they recognized that to be in the state of ketosis was human optimization. But they also recognized they couldn't expect their guys to go out on a mission and be fasting or worried about what they were eating. So that began the process when a doctor back in 2004 was given $10 million by the American military to say, can we supplementize? Can we access that molecule? So initially, the molecule was what we called a racemic mix, 50% chemical, 50% natural, which is very simply the equivalent of me going home in the evening and trying to put 2 keys into my front door and just expecting my door to unlock. It won't. And then the one we use is the only one in the world which is naturally fermented and is the full natural compound that your body would actually generate on its own.
Okay.
So
Well, Jen,
not
look,
all
thanks.
are created equally.
Okay. Thanks very much for giving us quite an overview then, Jen. What I want to do now is to switch over and just think more specifically about leadership. And we're very fortunate that we've got Brad Waldron here. Many of you here know him already, but he's worked for years with high-performing athletes and with various leaders. Brad, thanks very much for co-hosting this. I'm really keen to just find out a little bit more about you, and particularly about your sort of walk with leaders and leadership, and just to kind of say a little bit about how you think leadership has changed or has been changing over in recent times, latterly.
Good morning, everyone. Listen, I don't think anything's happened in 2020 to cause anyone to want to change anything, particularly there hasn't been anything that we haven't experienced before. Good Lord, no one could write the script for what I've seen go on in the leadership world. Listen, I get the good fortune of traveling the world, speaking and working with leaders to help them make better decisions, to have better days. That's probably it in a nutshell. So whether that involves standing on stage talking to 2,000 people around the whole leadership paradigm, or whether that's working in-house with an organization, helping them solve some of the challenges of their go-to-market strategy, or whatever the case may be. But the thing that I noticed with all of them is no one had a playbook for how to deal with what's gone on in the last, let's say 12 months, coming up to 12 months. No one did. And because of that, we got very different responses for everyone. And what I've learned consequently, and I'm sure everyone will attest to this, is that our energy is different to what it was before we went into the pandemic. And what I mean by that is talking to this thing called a camera and a screen all day gives you no energy back. So there's a higher level of exhaustion. There's higher levels of fatigue. And when I thought, oh, this is cool, we're going to cut out all that time that we would have spent traveling and going to strange meetings and all that type of stuff, people have more time for themselves. And do you know what? The opposite has become true. People have got themselves into a click habit of computer on, stay at the computer, or we've become the battery chicken of the corporate world, where this is our space and we stay in that space. So we lose our NEAT, right? Our non-exercise activity thermogenesis, when we move around and when we have that type of vitality, we lose that and we don't have it. So people are suffering with greater levels of fatigue, either obviously so they know it, or secondly, they just don't know it, but they're really tired at the end of the week. They just think, thank heavens it's a Friday. And so they've lost that little bit of vitality. And it's that vitality which really makes a difference. Now, listen, I'll say to leaders, I'll ask people on calls like this, I'll say, do me a favor, write down the 5 great things you've got from COVID, from the lockdown. And I get things like, people say, I get better sleep. I have more time with my family. I actually walk a little bit more. I eat better. I've saved money. I don't commute. And they're all fantastic things. But when you look at those things, there's 2 things I ask. Number one is, who were you before lockdown? If you're saying that you're spending more time with your family, you're eating better, you're sleeping more, who was this person before lockdown? And it's a very sobering question. But the first lockdown, people really took advantage of that. But the second one, and with the announcement that we heard last night around London going into tier 3, do you know what? I'm not seeing that same resolve, that same, like, we're going to manage this, we're going to nail it. And the biggest thing that leaders are doing, that I'm seeing, that I'm experiencing myself, is we're learning to surf what I call the diagonal a lot more. Surfing the diagonal is if you have an axis, at one end of the axis is your goals and your aspirations at the top of it, and we're pursuing them. The other part of the axis is fate. It's like life throws you a ball. It could be an illness. It could be a redundancy. It could be a dire financial position of the organization. And whilst we're trying to surf, get up to the top goals, people are doing the best they can, because fate is pulling them back down. And we've got to learn to surf the diagonal. And for me, having this whole notion where you got to train yourself in optimism, train yourself in optimal health, is probably something that should sit at the core of the way that we work. And from my old sports days, where, listen, I had the good fortune of playing sport nationally and internationally. And one thing that my coach always used to say to me, saying, Brad, success is simply this: the simple disciplines done daily. The simple disciplines done daily is what gets you ready to compete in the world stage. Equally, the opposite is also true. The opposite, which is failure, comes from simple disciplines not done daily. It's the simple errors in judgment done daily. And in my world, in this space, man, I didn't practice that for a few years. And after doing a sort of stupid bit of travel where I ended up in a hospital having my heart played with, I'll call it, my heart got tickled by some surgeons, simply because I was just thinking I was immortal, superhuman, traveling from London to Tel Aviv to Paris, back to Birmingham, and running conference after conference, 6 hours sleep over 3 days. And my body goes, here, I'm going to give you a bit of feedback. You ain't listening too well. And then I got on the pursuit of a better optimism, and that will come through. Better sleep, as Jen said, that's just phenomenal, sits at the heart of it. Better sleep, better life, better nutrition, better choices, better exercise activity, better hydration, and better supplementation. And they're like 5 principles, 5 habits that I've woven into my life to help me make better decisions, to have that, don't have brain fog, don't have fatigue, don't have that 11 o'clock in the morning. Oh, good Lord, I need a coffee again.
Brad, it's really interesting listening to this, because when we were talking earlier before the call, I was saying I've never really thought much about nutrition as being part of my kind of walk as a leader. So I just remember when things got tougher at my company, we were losing funding or whatever it was that was happening, I just put my alarm clock earlier. So I think I started off getting up at 6:30, and I ended up getting up at 5:30. And it just went back 5 minutes every few months. I thought, well, I just need to put in a little bit more time. And then I'd be home at 7, 7:30. And then come the weekend, I was just absolutely no good for anything. So a lot of what you've been saying there resonates with me. Tell me, why are you notionally sitting in the same room as a naturopath here? What you have got to say, how does it connect with what Jen was saying?
Oh my gosh, there's a whole cybernetic link there, or loop that goes on. One fuels the other and the other fuels the other, because the brain will take whatever it needs and it will deplete the body of just good old-fashioned natural resource that it's got. And unless we fuel that, unless we set the athlete up, and our brain is the athlete in our system, it's not going to be able to perform it. And it will take what it can, but then when there's nothing left to take, it leaches the body, or it just doesn't perform. And this is why I think it's just criminally important. And so back in the old days, when I was the regional managing director of the Covey Leadership Center, and if you've ever come across the 7 habits of highly effective people, there's 7 habits to help people be more effective. And the key is in the word habit. And habit means that it's free. You don't have to think about it. But habit 7 for us is sharpen the saw. And sharpen the saw is looking after yourself, because listen, life's going to be a marathon. I hope you live a long, healthy life. But one thing I've learned about nutrition and your whole longevity is your body will give you a bill at a certain part of your life based on how you've lived. You'll have to pay the bill. It's an invoice that you'll have to pay. And so if we want to be vital, as you say, I'll get up 5 minutes earlier. What you're saying to me is I'll work harder for a better outcome. And as well as I do, if I can change the map, the way I see the world, I can change what I do faster. And chucking more stuff at life doesn't mean necessarily you'll be more effective. And as well as I do, as leaders, we've got to not only look after a business, family, and be part of the family, but we've also got a custodian of stakeholders that we've also got to support. And some leaders, this as well as I do, some leaders can walk into the room and they can light it up, can't they? It's the way they connect, the way that they make conversations. It's just their general energy. Whereas some leaders, right, they only light the room up when they leave. Both are choices, but optimum physiology, optimum nutrition, optimum neurology are the 3 pillars that really help us get the best version of ourselves, to be able to think, to engage, to solve problems. Like Fergal, we were talking about this before everyone came online. We said, where do you get your best ideas? Never has anyone said to me, Brad, I get my best ideas when I'm sorting my email out. No one says that. When? Because when I create the space for ideas, and that might come through a shower, that might come through walking, that might come through doing yoga, whatever it is, but you've got to get yourself into that space where your brain has the freedom to explore what's in front of it. And I found that through the ketone advancements, and listen, supplementation, I'm very focused on, but I'm also very skeptical on. And this thing that Jennifer's talking about, as I discovered it, I wanted to really kick its tires hard. And like Jennifer, I went off to 4 different conferences in the space of 18 months just to see if there's, I have a Russian term I use, if there's any bullshitski going on behind the scenes. But it's just been consistently game changing for people that get their brain jeweled with this fuel called ketones, and how it just helps us have clarity, that indecisiveness, that brain fog. But we see the world through a lens of clarity, and we make better decisions.
Well, I have a confession to make, and that is that when I first heard about ketones, I thought, oh, come on, magic fairy dust, come on. And then I did a little bit of digging, of course, because the whole technology is coming from the States. I went online and went on Instagram and things like that and looked up ketones, and there is so much American razzmatazz and involved in it. And then I was introduced to you. I have to say, Brad, you were so skeptical about all the American stuff. I immediately started getting more interested. And I thought, if somebody who has a similar kind of disposition to myself is getting interested in this body fuel, then I'm interested. So you have quite a lot to do with my own walk. So listen, there are quite a few people here today who are sort of consultants. They work with leaders, they work with individuals, they work with organizations, and 1 or 2 personal trainers. There are people who are working with people at different phases of their lives. Do you actually have conversations with the people that you coach about what they're eating? I mean, do you talk about carbs, and do you talk about ketones?
Listen, I do actually, but I do it in a very not holistic way, but a very gentle way. I ask them, tell me this. Think of a time when you felt the best you ever had, when you just felt vital. You woke up in this morning and you thought, where is my cape? I've misplaced my cape. I need to wear my cape today. And think of that time. And then they go, yeah, I've got it. And I go, when was the last time you felt that? And based on the way they respond to me, tells me where they are. I've got a friend who wrote a wonderful book called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. His name is Dan Millman. And Dan tells me a story when people come to him for a little bit of coaching or therapy. He basically says, before we get into it, let me ask you 3 questions. Answer these 3 questions, and that will determine what I do next with you. And he basically goes, how much sleep do you get a night? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is the best sleep, 7-8 hours a night. How do you do? The second thing he asks, how much exercise do you get a week? And the third thing he asks is, tell me a little bit about your nutritional habits. And depending upon those answers, he sends them away, goes, go get some sleep, 8 hours a night on average. I want you to get yourself into 70% water content food, leafy greens. And I need you to do some exercise. I want you to do 3 sets of exercise a week, get your heartbeat to 140 beats a minute, and then come and see me in 3 weeks' time. Let's see what happens. And do you know what? You get a remarkable transformation. But the thing about the ketones for me is it means that if you wanted to get into ketogenic lifestyle, right, where you're using fat as fuel, between you and I, it's hard bloody work, right? It's hard work. It's easier when we're at home, but it's not as enjoyable as eating potatoes or lasagna. It's not as enjoyable. So how do you get the benefits without the suffering? And so when I give my people, ketones to drink in a soluble form, knock it back and just let nature do its best. Man, the things I had one guy say to me, Brad, now listen, I'm anti everything when it comes to drugs. And he said, Brad, where did you get this class A cocaine from? And I just went, you what? I've never heard it referred to that. And I said, why? And he says, I've just not felt this type of vitality, but it's not a pick me up and drop me. It's just a constant feeling of feeling great. And so what I do is I go, folks, give it a try. See what happens. See what happens. And one of three things, you'll either feel magnificent or you'll get a bit of discomfort. And that's the ketones going, hey, you got a bit of bloody toxicity in here. Need to help you out. I'm going to force a few things on you. Read into that as you will. And the third thing that happens is nothing. And Jennifer taught me this, which basically said that sometimes your body is so depleted, it takes a bit of time for your body to get back into a state of good fuel. And for me, I was one of those guys because I drink this stuff. And the guy that introduced me to it was a nutritionist called Gavin Addiston, and he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy like me. And I'm just going, Gav, I'm drinking this stuff and I just feel normal, right? Normal for me is good, but I don't have those feelings that you're talking about. And then one day I'm sitting in a meeting, I'm coaching someone. And then this guy goes to me, Brad, are you all right? And I said, yeah, why? And I'm holding the back of the chair like I am now. And he said, you keep flexing your pecs at me. I'm not sure if that's an Australian male courtship thing. And I said, I am flexing my pecs too, aren't I? What's going on? And we had a good laugh. And I spoke to Gav and he said, the ketones kicked in. But it took a couple of weeks. So when I look at people and you're working, Fergal, you must do this too. You're working with a chief exec and you just know they've got nothing left. You can't say work harder. You can't say get better people around you. You just know that their tank is empty. And this is where our role comes in. We've got to help them fill their tank up again. Because if we can help them fill the tank, they're capable of making better decisions. They're capable of being the inspirational leader that gives people confidence and congruence to say, I'm staying the long haul on this, particularly now, because we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. We hope it's not the light of an oncoming train, right? We're seeing the light. And what we're doing is people are starting to let themselves go a little bit. Oh, almost there, but no, we've got to get, as my father always say, we've got to smash through the finishing line, smash through it. And that can only come if we've got the right energy. So what Jennifer's doing is similar to what you do, similar to what I do, which is helping people be the best version of themselves, to make the best decisions, to be on fire, to be on form. Because if they haven't got that vitality, they're not going to tap that resource, which is the greatness of their brain.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, thank you. That's given a really kind of whole picture of where we are in terms of leadership at the moment, what the strains and stresses are at the moment. You've given a really good breakdown of what you've seen out there in terms of people's behavior, the pros and the cons, and then you've added in a whole new dimension of just looking after the body. I love what you were saying there about your body giving you feedback. And actually recognizing that, yes, you've got a brain and you can think and you can learn, but also, you know, what you take into the body has a major impact on how you actually behave and how you think and feel. And you talked there about a little bit more practically about, well, what does getting into ketosis mean in terms of the impact that it can make? Listen, everybody, I want to open this up to questions in a minute, and do stick your questions in the chat box, and then we can see how we get on with those. But before we do that, I want to just invite Catherine. So Catherine's one of our hosts, and before she unmutes herself, I can be really rude. So Catherine is like a really thrusting business leader. She's set up at least 2-3 businesses over the years, and is now running a highly effective recruitment business for the Thames Valley, just looking at top quartile performers. And it's a business called Firefly, and she has another business called CV, as in, you know, what you write resume, but spelled SEEVEE. And I just want Catherine to tell your story a little bit, from being a business leader, but also the feedback that your body gave you 2 or 3 years back, and where you got to. And then just a little bit about, you know, how your thinking developed about the whole carbs, glucose, ketone went.
Thank you, Fergal, and good morning, everybody. Very nice introduction. But yeah, I think it's very interesting, and reflecting on what Brad said, you know, who was that person before? If you don't look after your nutrition, you will pay the bill. I was that person who had to pay the bill. So basically, back in July 2017, I was running a successful recruitment company, leading around about 20 people out there, meeting, you know, very senior level clients, you know, 15, 20 times a week, you know, really out there trying to get people to perform, to reach KPIs. But I was winning awards. I'd won the Venus National Business Mother of the Award of the year. And then 2 minutes later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So everything had changed. This person who could get up at 6 in the morning, go work, you know, 12, 14, 16-hour days, whatever it took to be at the top and be successful, that's what I was doing. But no, now I had to have chemotherapy, I had to have surgery, I had to have radiotherapy. And, you know, I had all these people, and I thought I was leading these people well, but how could I be? And that terrified me, because it was, you know, very much recruitment. You know, many of you will know this is a real work hard, play hard environment, and it seemed fine. But I was really fortunate, because during my journey, I was like, I need to be the pilot here, not a passenger, not at all. And that's when I came across Jennifer. So strangely, the pandemic has actually been really good to me, because in meeting Jennifer, I'll be honest, I went down the biohack route. That was what was going to work for me. I love carbs, I love drinking wine, but Jennifer showed me this product, and I thought, actually, do you know what? Do you think I can drink 2 ketones each day? Well, the way it made me feel, of course I could do that. I literally, everything has changed for me. The way I lead the business. So people, we don't have jars of Quality Street drumstick lollies on the side anymore, but there's free ketones for all of them. Because what does it do to you? You lose your brain fog. You don't have those sluggish afternoons. I used to always think, oh my God, I'm so energetic. I've used all my energy by 2 p.m. But the reality was I was just flagging. I'd carb loaded my lunch, thinking I need to eat to drive myself through the afternoon, or I need 20 cups of coffee. But I didn't need that anymore. You know, I take my ketones at, you know, 7, 8, 9 in the morning, whatever's appropriate for me, and then again at 2 in the afternoon. And for me, it's just I'm less stressed, I'm focused, and you know, my team have seen the change in me. It's all a kind of joke now, as you know, Catherine, have you had your ketones? Because otherwise, you know, you're not allowed on the Zoom. But you know, Fergal talked about my 3 businesses. So you know, Firefly is a thriving finance recruitment business. So happy about that, because I'd had more focus, and we were able to, you know, redesign the way we operated, and we operate quite differently to many other recruitment businesses out there. CV, it's almost like we knew that something like this pandemic was going to happen, that there was going to be mass unemployment and redundancies, and you know, we wanted to help people. But my passion has always been recruitment. But you know, truthfully, my involvement with Proven and Ketones, sorry for telling you the business, but it's true, because it's changed so many lives in just this year, is absolutely huge. So for me, if you're out there leading, this product might be for you, but it's for the wider team, and what you can bring to the party for those people that you're coaching through life.
Catherine, thanks. That's great to get your story there. I'm keen now to just address some of the questions coming in. So, and I love the skeptical ones. So, Tom, can I just ask you to tell us a little bit more about your question? So you've written here, having a personal success story about lowering my cholesterol through a low-fat diet plus exercise. I'm struggling to get my head around high fat and cholesterol. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, so I'm 6'3", and I've never weighed, I've never reached 14 stone. So I've never been particularly large. But naturally my waist is probably about 32 inches. My kind of fighting weight when I was younger was about 12.5 stone. And gradually through my kind of 30s and 40s, I kind of progressively got a bit larger around the waist, never probably got to more than about 33.5 inch waist. So nobody would ever have described me as overweight. But my cholesterol was gradually growing from 5 and upwards and got close to about 7. And so in an executive medical, my doctor said to me, I want you to start taking a small dose of statins because your cholesterol's going up. And I said, well, hang on a minute, I'm not even 50 yet. If I start taking statins now, I'm going to be on for the rest of my life. I don't want to do that. What alternative do I have? And he said, well, you could try losing a few pounds. And I was thinking, losing a few pounds, but I'm not overweight. What? So this was the conversation that was going on. So, I mean, from my perspective, it wasn't as if I was doing no exercise. So I decided I'd just increase my level of exercise. And I would cut out, higher fat elements of my diet. So I went on to skimmed milk. I cut out butter from my diet, and I don't eat cheese hardly at all these days. But I exercise more regularly, and I've gone back down to about 12.5 stone. And my cholesterol within 6 months was back down, in between 4.5 and 5. So I would be really concerned about the idea of raising my fat intake.
Okay, well, listen, before I ask Jen to comment on that, I'm just going to say, firstly, if anybody wants to stay on at 10 o'clock, then we will hang around a little bit, but I realise some people will have to go. The second thing is that Jen is not licensed to be giving direct advice on this call. So anything she says is generic, in other words, dealing generally with issues as opposed to giving specific. Just need to say that for insurance purposes. Jen, how would you respond to those kind of generic concerns?
Firstly, I would say thank you very much for raising this issue. It is something that a lot of people are concerned about. One thing I'd like to say, there are very different forms of fat available. And I just want to quote eminent cardiologists who I've met over the years. And believe it or not, some of the plastic margarines are the worst ones for the body. And what we do need to focus on is true natural fats, the ones that God had on the earth, even real butter, grass-fed butter. There's a massive movement back to butter. And actually cholesterol isn't something to be feared. And this, again, eminent cardiologists stand up and say this: the brain needs cholesterol. We need cholesterol. But actually there's a lot of studies that show a raised sugar diet raises your cholesterol more than fat. So once people have looked at some of the studies, again, the fascinating thing is, if you look at certain high-fat foods, these foods are often served with carbohydrate. So you might have had bread and butter, steak and chips, fish and chips. And so they started to realize that actually how much was sugar and raising the carbohydrates, how much was that elevating our cholesterol levels? So as I said, fat is nothing to be concerned about. And also looking at the ketone research, be it the ketone research for fasting or following a lower carbohydrate, higher fat diet, or drinking ketones, again, there's actually positive benefits. That's what research is finding on anything to do with cardiovascular health and cholesterol and triglycerides as well.
Good, thank you for that. Aga, I think we've probably addressed your point there as well. Can I just ask Kate? So Kate said, morning, I've read negative reports of a high keto diet being linked to osteoporosis. I'm working with perimenopausal and menopausal women, so is this a concern? Thoughts? And then the other point, how long have the drinks been on the market, I'm asking to understand what long-term negatives there might be. Kate, do you want to say anything more about that before we?
Well, all I'll say is, hello everyone, by the way, is when I say I've read reports, that's not in-depth reports, that's me having a quick, scout around on the internet. So they could be completely unsubstantiated, but I know that, that's going to be one of the first questions that someone's going to ask me. So perhaps someone else has said, are there any papers or reports that we could read or be pointed to?
There's massive research massive research out there. It is an emerging area. Having said that, the ketogenic diet is a medical diet that goes back, next year it's 100 years old. And in fact, I was speaking to a great pediatrician and neurologist the other day, and we got onto the subject of ketones because I've been helping with epilepsy a lot, especially with children and children on PEG systems and so forth. And he said, this is just incredible news. He said, because I used to work with the ketogenic diet successfully as a neurologist when nothing else worked. So he said, it's incredible that the technology has moved forward. But jumping back to your first question, you're absolutely right, Kate. When you are on a higher fat diet or drinking ketones, the body generally is in more of a acid state, because what happens is you lose water, and when you lose water, you lose electrolytes. And this is why when you take ketones, the information is very clear. As Brad said earlier, you drink a lot of fluid, and a lot of people, let's look at the brain. The brain is mainly made up of fat and water. So we need fat. Let's debunk that myth. And I really suggest reading that book as well. And secondly, so it's hydrating and having some fat in the diet. But what I say for women, every subcategory is different. But what you need to be really aware of, Kate, is literally every perimenopause or menopausal woman I have ever treated is in that insulin resistant state. So nothing works for them often. And it's because the insulin resistance has increased by being in that particular space. So what I do for women in particular, I'm fully aware that women need to increase more minerals, and perhaps more so than men. So electrolytes and water always feature in any ketogenic program. That's absolutely essential. And for women, I often will do a higher rate of a supplement with magnesium, and include a small amount of something like a sea algae calcium, and also look at some of the other minerals that are responsible for bone. But let's not fool ourselves with a conventional Western diet. The conventional Western diet is extremely acid. So that will do exactly the same to the bones. How many women do we know who drink Diet Coke? That strips your bones more than anything, because your body's so intelligent. What it does is go, oh, there's a lot of acid in my blood. Oh, my bones have got a wonderful store of calcium. Oh, I can buffer the pH of my blood. So it will literally rob from your bones. So you're absolutely right. What I would argue, though, is many states take your body into an acid situation. And for women, lots of leafy greens, things like broccoli and the cruciferous vegetables are essential, because what they also do is they drive out some of the estrogens in the body that you don't want, certain forms of estrogens in your body as well. So lots of green vegetables, healthy fats, super beneficial. And just jumping back to the research. So some of the research is done on the ketogenic diet and on fasting, because at the end result is elevated ketones. And then the research started, as in Dr. Richard Veitch, who set up the department at Oxford University and also worked in America. He took 2 studies, including one, interesting enough, on the heart, being improved by 25% on ketones. He took those to the American military in 2004. But studies go back. If you just have a bit of a play or do Google Scholar, you'll have great fun seeing there's a lot of research out there. And what I love is the esters, which are the more pharmaceutical end, that is driving a lot of the research. And in fact, they've even released a paper in July where they're doing a little bit of a hypothesis even on the metabolic, immunological effect and cardiovascular effect of ketones in relation even to COVID. So they've taken sort of what are the symptoms that most people are dealing with, and what are the benefits in general of ketones. Could there be a correlation here? And I think, you know, when we look at the overall picture, we do find that people, there are risk factors. We know risk factors include inflammation, obesity, and diabetes. And we know being on a ketogenic diet, fasting, or elevating ketones any which way you can, lowers the blood glucose, lowers inflammatory markers. So I would say it's well worth being in more of an acid state, but just be mindful and aware. And I think for women, it's just really useful to just pick up some urine sticks and occasionally just check how alkali they actually are. Or even a wonderful tip in the morning is people often do the hot water and lemon, but little do they know the most powerful part of the lemon is actually the zest. And that helps your phase 2 liver detoxification. So I often say to women, have your lemon by all means, but actually add the zest. And that really creates, even though it's an acid food, it creates an alkaline ash in the blood.
Wow.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you get that, Kate? I hope
Sorry.
you just write all of that down.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thank you, Kate.
I'm just keen to point out that we have an international mix of people on this call, and Aga is in the middle of Finland, I think, at the moment. Aga, I'm interested that you've been on the keto diet for 6 months already. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I really enjoy it. And yeah, I've been already 6 months on this diet, and I love it. And I think it's life-changing for me because I really feel different. I think different. I analyze things differently. I have fresh perspective on the matters that normally I would approach in a different way. I can even see a difference in sports because I play basketball, and I realized that now I analyze while playing and I try to figure out different solutions so that I can be faster. So it's amazing. And I think I would like to keep this diet till the end of my life because it really makes me feel good in my body and great with my brain. I asked the question, I think the last question I asked was, even though I keep this diet, sometimes I feel like I would like to eat something sweet. And of course, I try to stay away from conventional sweets, and I try to use fruits or dried fruits, or I eat 80% cocoa chocolate. So that makes me feel better. But is there any other way I could avoid those moments? Is it a matter of having not enough level of fat in my diet that I face those moments, even though I stick to it? I
think you're only human.
Yeah.
Anybody who's on here who says they don't have sweet cravings, hallelujah to you. We're human beings at the end of the day. One thing I hope you don't mind me saying, but I certainly wouldn't add dried fruit into your diet. Yeah. It's literally, they're sugar bombs, serious sugar bombs. So 2 things I'd say. Number 1, looking at ketones. So ketones have got this, I won't go into the science, but basically they help with our they help with a hunger hormone, and they also help with that sweet craving, quite simply. So when people feel like that, they'll, by often drinking a ketone, which are delicious drinks, all different flavors, that will negate and take away that, that kind of urge. Secondly, there are many natural sweeteners available now. So I make literally everything keto version. So you can have keto cake. I make keto chocolate. So I don't even have the 70% chocolate. I buy 100% black chocolate which is just the cocoa powder. Well, let's say hallelujah to that, is brilliant for you, fabulous source of nutrition. But then I would add monk fruit or erythritol, or stevia, which is basically a herbal sweetener. So all those three do not in any way spike your blood sugar. And then I'll even add, if you're vegan, you can add some coconut cream to the melted chocolate. Or I add fresh cream. It's great if you've got cream about to turn in the fridge, because then it lasts forever in this chocolate. I add things like salt again, because we need to keep our sodium levels high. So that's one thing, again, important for everybody on the call. As I said earlier, the electrolytes are these valuable minerals: sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. So I throw sea salt in, and then for a thermogenic kick to the metabolism, I throw chili in as well. So make your own chocolate, because it's, sorry.
I'm going to stop you there because we've reached 10 o'clock. And if you want to carry on afterwards, there'll be that opportunity. But listen, I just want to thank everybody for coming. My own walk in 15 seconds, I was bought out by my investors a couple of years ago and ended up having a very plural life with several non-executive directorships and advising businesses. And I just found, I got to 7 or 8 months ago, and all the juggling I found was taking such a weight. I discovered the whole ketone approach at that point and started to experiment a little bit. And I have to echo what Aga was saying there. My mental clarity has just increased hugely. And I find now that I'm just in a much more balanced state, without that kind of up and downness that you get from the more carb heavy diet. So, and also having met Brad and Jennifer and Catherine, I was really keen to put something together with them to talk to the sorts of people, well, who like us, basically. You guys are pretty similar in your thinking, to just share this thinking, because we're thinking, let's not wait for government to do anything. That's not going to happen. Change will come from leaders in society changing habits, and they will talk to other people, and they will change in due course. We haven't banged on about a particular product, but there is one called Prove It that we are all using simply because it's the non-chemical version of ketones. I had to get my head around the price to start with, because it basically, a sachet of ketones is the same as a posh cup of coffee in London, basically. And so I had to think to myself, right, I'm not going to have any more posh coffee in Cafe Nero. I'm going to take my ketone instead. If you want to stay on, please do so. Other than that, we really appreciate you giving up your time today, and thank you very much to our speakers.
Can I just jump in there, Fergal, just for people to be aware, you can't buy this in the shops. So do refer back to who invited you on the call, and they can help you get this wonderful liquid.
Good stuff. So just give about 30 seconds for people to leave if they want to. And then if anybody just wants to ask questions or make any comments. There is a question here about, I'm keen to understand if migraines and headaches may be helped or improved in the long run.
Yeah, there's some fascinating research going on with migraines. Again, if you just understand that a migraine is, again, an inflammatory condition, just inflammation in your brain. And there's a wonderful researcher in Switzerland, Dr. Eleanor Gross, and she had horrendous migraines. And so she ended up doing her doctoral study on the use of ketones for migraine. And it's not only transformed her life, but all of those that she's now running migraine clinics. So yes, what I've certainly seen in clinical practice, migraines and headaches, because it is anti-inflammatory. So if you just think inflammation causes pain, so by lowering inflammatory markers, and it doesn't happen immediately. It's like several of us on the call have talked about, sometimes the ketone doesn't have the immediate effect. And I think that's very simply, I like to describe, go back to the car analogy, but actually an old Morris Minor. And, you know, the older we are, there's more that's broken inside. So underneath your physical, you know, underneath in the bonnet. And so the ketones will do that biological repair. And that I had various conditions of pain as well with everything I'd gone through. And I never thought I would ever be in a gym again. And this is talking 16 years. And I'm back in a gym training now. And I put that down to ketones, but it wasn't immediate. For me, it probably took 3 months. And then suddenly everything on that inflammatory side and pain side changed for me personally. Mm. And just another thing, which is very interesting to me, is that we've talked about the diet, we've talked about fasting, and the use of exogenous ketones, drinking the ketones. And as many say, the higher the blood level within reason, so because we are talking about a natural mineral salt version, the maximum it will raise your blood is 0.5 to 1. If you took the pharmaceutical version, I call it pharmaceutical just because of the research and where it's being sold, that is 5 millimoles. So that is a far greater, steeper rise of your millimoles. So again, one has to be a little bit careful if you took a stronger version, because you don't want to elevate. There is a danger of elevating the ketones too much. But by following a ketogenic diet, and if you wanted to, and drinking ketones, it will just take the body back into that state of ketosis occasionally, which it needs to do, and where your body will function at a far more optimum level. And as I said, your brain will uptake more. They've found that the higher the blood level of ketones, the more your brain will suck up, as Brad was talking earlier again about the brain robbing, and that's absolutely right.
Mm. Brilliant. Well, listen, there are no further questions coming in, so we're going to close it there. So I'll invite our guests to leave and to have a really good day, and I'll invite our hosts just to stay on for 5 minutes so that we can have a quick chat follow up. But really appreciated you coming, and there are several messages there saying I'd like to do more research on, or 1 or 2 people saying, can I have the recording? We'll make sure that the recording is available, and we'll make sure that you know where you can go next if you want to pursue things further.
And Catherine will have it on the Ketone Education group, the recording as well.
Yeah.